Welcome in, everyone. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and I know we're all extremely excited about this highly anticipated matchup with the AFC Championship game between the Baltimore Ravens and Kansas City Chiefs set to take place in Baltimore. That being said, and with all due respect to the Ravens' opponent, I began to notice some potentially significant areas of concern for the Chiefs heading into this game on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Now, I don't want to make this seem as though I'm disrespecting the Chiefs. More so, it's just an objective observation. So I couldn't help but do a deep dive into how these teams have fared this season when facing opponents that run either similar schemes or prioritize certain play styles. Now, I'm personally not a fan of clickbait, so I won't pretend that they are polar opposites, as we would have had some sort of storyline already built up long before now with that. But I believe there's a significant evidence that shows that this Ravens team is more than capable of giving this Chiefs team all they can handle. But now that you know why we're here, let's get to it.
They're going to get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that. I'm a Raven. It's on. All year. Every year.
So, the way in which I'm going to be giving you this analysis is going to be broken down into two different subtopics. We got the Chiefs passing and pass blocking versus the Ravens pass coverage and pass rush, and the Ravens rushing attack versus the Chiefs run defense. So, with those two categories defined, let's take a look at what I found. Starting with the Chiefs passing and pass blocking versus the Ravens pass coverage and pass rush. Now, Patrick Mahomes has passed for the sixth most yards in the league and 27 passing touchdowns, 14 interceptions. Over the season, Mahomes' favorite target was unsurprisingly Travis Kelce. What may be a little more surprising, at least at the start of the season, was Rashee Rice becoming Mahomes' second favorite target, hauling in all these other numbers that you can see here, and leading the team with 7 touchdowns. Now, this trend continued into the postseason, and in the Miami game, Mahomes went 23 of 41 for 262 and a touchdown. Mahomes completed passes to 9 different players, but Kelce and Rice had 15 of the 23 completions and saw 22 of the 41 attempts come their way. This is pretty unbalanced, but you can't argue with the results. 201 of the 262 yards, that means they accounted for 70% of Mahomes' passing yards, as well as the only touchdown that went to Rice. In the divisional round against Buffalo, Mahomes did spread the ball out a bit more, with 9 of his 17 completions going to Kelce and Rice on 10 targets. This still produced 122 yards and both of Mahomes' 2 touchdowns going to Kelce. But for comparison's sake, as compared to the Miami game, Kelce and Rice had 65% of the completions, while the 7 others had 35. But in Buffalo, Kelce and Rice only had 52% as compared to the 48 for the 5 other players. Now, to say that Mahomes, by extension the Chiefs, only succeed when Kelce and Rice perform well isn't exactly accurate all the time, but having said that, in the 4 games where Mahomes has over a 120 passer rating this season, the Chiefs went 4-0, and coincidentally, over those 4 games, Kelce and Rice combined for 687 yards and 6 touchdowns, while having a catch percentage of 85%. They also averaged 32.5 points per game over that span. On the other side of that coin, 4 games where Patrick Lavon Mahomes II had his lowest passer rating, Kelce and Rice pairing combined for only 393 yards and 1 touchdown with a 68.75 catch percentage, and in those games they only averaged 15.75 points per game. Over the regular season, Mahomes was sacked only 27 times and at a rate of 4.3, which was the second lowest in the league, only slightly higher than Josh Allen. This trend also carried into the postseason, as he wasn't sacked at all in Miami or Buffalo. But Mahomes was sacked 3 or more times, only 4 times this year, and in those games where he was sacked 3 times were against New England, Green Bay, and the second Denver game. He was sacked 4 times in the second Las Vegas game on Christmas Day. In these 4 games, the Chiefs went 1-3 while averaging 17.25 points per game. He also had 4 games where he wasn't sacked at all, and in those games they went 3-1 while averaging 28.5 points per game. I know it's not a huge revelation that when a quarterback gets sacked a lot, they don't usually play as well. But what is relevant is that by cross-referencing the games that he got sacked most with the 4 games with his lowest passer rating, through these 6 games we get a few trends that show up. In each of these games, Mahomes is sacked at least once, but in total 12 times. He has 1 interception in 3 of each of these games and 2 in each of the other 3, with a combined total of 9. His touchdown to interception ratio over these 6 games is 6 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. He only has 1 game where he throws for over 300 yards and averages 228.3 over all six, with his average over the season being 274.1. The Chiefs are 2-4 over this 6-game span, and his completion percentage in all but one game is under 64%. In all other games, it's 69.2. But along that same line, the completion percentage stat that I just gave, the Chiefs are 2-6 when Mahomes completes less than 65% of his throws, and they're 10-0 when he throws above that 65 mark. The Ravens defense has been one of the best, if not the best, when it comes to both pass rush and coverage. They've allowed 60.5 completion percentage over the whole season, ranking 6th in passing yards, allowing 3,263. They're second in passing touchdowns with 18, third in interceptions, which is also 18, so that's a wash, and first in net yards gained per pass attempt with 4.7 yards. They lead the league in sacks, but more importantly, they had 16 players that recorded a sack and at least 7 players with 3 sacks. Pressure is coming from everywhere, but a big reason why that's been so effective is that Justin Madubuike, getting 13 sacks and 33 pressures up the middle, forces QBs out of the pocket into the waiting arms of either Jadeveon Clowney or Kyle Van Noy, each with 9.5 and 9 sacks respectively. The other factor that has helped propel this pass rush has been the fact that they don't have to blitz to get pressure. Combining the numbers of all interior linemen along with all of the outside linebackers on this team, which is a total of 11 players, they've only blitzed a total of 23 times, and 10 of those blitzes, or half of them almost, were coming from Kyle Van Noy. So I've spoken at length before about the Ravens secondary and their safeties in previous videos, and it's because they deserve a lot of praise for dominating all season. The Ravens have 8 players with at least 1 interception and 3 with multiple interceptions. So a real quick rundown on the numbers that you're seeing in front of you here. The first completion percentage is all of the DBs together. So that's all the cornerbacks for the Ravens, 52.25. And then it's broken down Stevens, Humphrey, Mollett, and Darby. The passer rating, again, this is for that whole group of 4, is 68.5. And then you see Stevens, Humphrey, Mollett, Darby. You get it. Together, they have 165 tackles with 15 missed over the whole season, and the interception to touchdown ratios are 4-4, which is basically just a wash as well. For the safeties, you get Hamilton, Stone, Williams. These are their combined stats. Again, it follows the same principle as the one above, so I'll let you go ahead and just take a look at that. I will say, though, that Hamilton, or KH is what you're reading, is just a stud. He just stands out in every category. He has the lowest completion percentage, he has the lowest passer rating by a mile, and his interception to touchdown ratio is 4-1, with 4 interceptions allowing only 1 touchdown. In the divisional game, everybody stayed status quo. Nobody allowed a touchdown because the defense didn't allow a single touchdown. They allowed only 107 yards from the DB position, a 76.1 rating, and 10 tackles with 2 missed. The safeties, they missed a couple tackles, which is a little bit meh, but 58.3 passer rating and only 7 yards gained. Now, the Ravens have faced 5 of the top 10 quarterbacks as far as passing yards, and not only were these QBs leading winning teams when they played the Ravens, 4 of the 5 of them made the playoffs. The Ravens also beat all of these teams as well. The list includes Tua, Goff, Purdy, CJ Stroud, and Lawrence. Every one of these quarterbacks averaged over 250 yards passing per game on the season and over 20 passing touchdowns. 4 out of the 5 had a completion percentage over 65, and 4 out of 5 had a passer rating of over 97 on the season. And all of them had equal to or less than the number of interceptions that Patrick Mahomes has. Here's how each one of those QBs looked when they faced the Ravens defense compared to their season average. Starting with Tua, his numbers for the season averages are on the left, and on the right, you can see where he faced the Ravens. Completion percentage was lower, passing yards were lower. He actually had more than his average touchdowns. Too many interceptions, 3 sacks, and a 71.9 passer rating. On to Goff, again, lower percentage. He actually had more yards against the Ravens, but a lot of that was in garbage time, to be honest, but the stats are there. He had no touchdowns, 1 pick, sacked 5 times, 68.4 rating. Purdy was a tough one. Much lower percentage, lower yards, no touchdowns, 4 picks, 2 sacks, and his lowest passer rating of the season at 42.6. Stroud we faced twice. So I have on here on the left is his previous the season stats, and then in the center is the first time he faced us, and the second time he faced us is all the way to the right. And I found it a little surprising that he did much worse against us the second time. So his completion percentage is still down on both. His yards are much better in the first. No touchdowns, no interceptions on either two games. He didn't get sacked in the second game, which I guess is the positive there, because he was sacked 5 times in the first game, and his passer rating went down again. So Stroud doesn't like to play the Ravens. Lawrence is kind of as the 10th on this list out of the top 10. His numbers don't look fantastic, but he did actually beat us as far as his yards per average. So, other than that, lower completion percentage, 1 touchdown, no picks, sacked once, lower passer rating. Patrick Mahomes is an incredible quarterback for sure, but this defense is better than any he has faced before, and with almost everybody back at full strength on this historic defense, I wouldn't put my money on Mahomes having a career day. In fact, I wager it might be one of his worst. Now let's get into the Ravens rushing versus the Chiefs rushing defense. The Ravens as a franchise have built their culture around defense and running the ball, and we just talked about the first one, so let's get to the second one where Baltimore is again the best in the business. Not only do we lead the league in rushing attempts at 541 in yards in 2,661, we also are fourth in touchdowns with 26, third in yards per attempt at 4.9, and the Ravens boast 2 players who have over 800 yards on the ground and another 2 who are almost at 400 by the end of the year. One of whom, Keaton Mitchell, isn't even playing now, but amassed a sizable yardage and impact over just a 6-game span. J.K. Dobbins carried the ball only 8 times before a season-ending injury sadly halted his impeding comeback. My point in mentioning both Keaton and J.K. is that even with their former second-round pick and their budding rookie sensation, the Ravens still ravaged teams on the ground. Nothing seemed to be able to stop this Ravens offense when it came to running the ball. The Ravens had at least 100 yards on the ground in every single game this season. 3 games over 200 yards, and even one of those games was only 2 yards shy of being a 300-yard game, where the Ravens decimated a then division-leading Seattle team 37-4. No other team has achieved over 100 yards in every single game except Baltimore. San Francisco is the only other team that's close, who only had 1 game where they were under 100 yards. That being said, they didn't even have a single 200-yard game, so take that for what it's worth. The Chiefs have only allowed 10 rushing touchdowns this season, which is good enough for 4th best, so good for them there. However, taking a look at the fact that they're only 18th best in total rushing yards allowed, and even more concerning, a 24th best in yards per attempt, and you'll start to see what I'm getting at. 4.5 yards per carry is not a good look when you're rolling into Baltimore for a day game that calls for 50 degrees and rain. I wouldn't be as concerned for the Chiefs fans if they had maybe started to look a little bit better towards the end of the season, but having allowed over 100 yards in 4 of their last 5 games and 182 last week to Buffalo, well, it's looking like a long day in the trenches for Kansas City. In all 6 of the Chiefs' losses this season, they gave up over 100 yards. Just in case you need a little more convincing, let's take a look at the teams who allowed the top 3 most rushing yard games to the Ravens. Seahawks in Week 9, they ranked 8th coming into the game at 96.9 yards per game given up. The Ravens ran the ball 41 times, 298 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The Jags in Week 15, they were ranked 4th at the time, giving up only 92.2 yards per game. Ravens again rushed 42 times, 251 yards, and a touchdown. And just this past week against the Texans, who ranked 6th at the end of the season, giving up only 91.2 yards per game, were gouged 42 times for 229 yards and 2 touchdowns. Currently, as I said, the Chiefs are ranked 18th in rushing yards allowed and have an average of 101.3 yards per game as of right now. Since the bye week with the Ravens and Lamar under center, they're averaging 176.2 yards per game on the ground, and given what I saw last week with Josh Allen against this porous Chiefs defense, I'll take my chances with Lamar, Gus, and Hill. I know I may come off as an overconfident Ravens fanboy who is picking the stats I want to display, but the numbers are there for you to look at yourself. And if you don't believe the numbers, then use the eye test. Because I, for one, know that even the most hardcore Chiefs fan is looking at Lamar and hoping he doesn't put the entire defense on a highlight reel. But he will, because he does it to everybody. Like I said, I saw a trend and I took a look to see if it was as bad as it seemed, and it was in fact worse. I'm not saying the Ravens are going to shut out the Chiefs. That would be remarkable and a blasphemous thing to say, I know. But I also find it less likely that the Chiefs blow out the Ravens. At the end of the day, we're left with these two questions. One, how will Mahomes deal with the Ravens' elite pass rush and coverage unit? And two, how will the Chiefs stop the best rushing attack in the league? I hope you all enjoyed this analysis, and I look forward to watching the game. I only wish I could be there in person, but since I can't, I must ask every Ravens fan listening to this that you need to cheer as loud and yell as loud as you can. Let's cheer for Lamar, let's cheer for our boys, and let's punch our ticket to the Super Bowl. And as always, stay safe and go Ravens.